2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Roger, roll, Challenger. Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good ADUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles, downrange distance 3 nautical miles. Engines throttling up, 3 engines now to 104%. Challenger, go with throttle up. Roger, go with throttle up. Per minute 15 seconds, velocity 2,900 feet per second, altitude 9.
32 years ago, on January 28, 1986, NASA had its first shuttle tragedy ever, killing all 7 crew members, including the first teacher in space. Even though it was a tremendous tragedy for America, NASA achieved some goals they have never accomplished before.
Even though all 7 crew members were killed, NASA and America will never forget their story. On the Challenger, there was the first teacher in space, which was Krista McAuliffe. The other astronauts on the space shuttle were Dick Scobie, Gregory Jarvis, Michael Smith, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, and Ellison Onizuka.
Today I'm directing NASA to begin a search in all of our elementary and secondary schools and to choose as the first citizen passenger in the history of our space program, one of America's finest, a teacher.
Krista McAuliffe was born on September 2, 1948 in Boston, Massachusetts. She began her teaching career in 1970. In 1984, Krista was a social studies teacher at Concord High School in New Hampshire when she was chosen out of more than 10,000 applicants to be the first non-scientist in space.
Early next year.
It's not often that a teacher is at a loss for words. I know my students wouldn't think so. I've made 9 wonderful friends over the last 2 weeks. And when that shuttle goes, they might be one body. But there's going to be 10 souls that I'm taking with me. Thank you.
She was quoted saying, "I watched the space program being born. I would like to participate." She was planning to keep a journal of her experiences. She was also going to film lessons to the students around the world while she was on board.
I would like to humanize the space age by giving a perspective from a non-astronaut, because I think the students will look at that and say, this is an ordinary person. This ordinary person is contributing to history, and if they can make that connection, then they're going to get excited about history, they're going to get excited about the future, they're going to get excited about space.
On the day of the launch, she stated, "Imagine a history teacher making history." Her family watched the launch from the stands of the Kennedy Space Center, and her students watched from the high school in New Hampshire. As she was boarding the space shuttle, she was waving to the crowd. Nobody realized this would be her final goodbye.
The tragedy to this disaster is very clear, yet it impacted more than just NASA's shuttle crew. During the video, you can see the expression on mission control's faces. At that moment, many people realized that the Challenger exploded.
Obviously a major malfunction. We have no downlink.
There was also a lot of astronauts' families in the crowd watching the space shuttle lift off into the air. Everyone was so devastated when this tragedy happened.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd planned to speak to you tonight to report on the State of the Union. But the events of earlier today have led me to change those plans. Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This is truly a national loss.
On the day before the launch, Florida suffered a freezing cold night, freezing all, if not most, of the shuttle and launch pads. The rocket booster, one of the main parts of the ship, had a frozen O-ring, and O-rings aren't supposed to reach low temperatures. So, this was a big problem. O-rings allowed gas and air to seep out during the launch. Some engineers recommended launching the ship later, but nobody really took the idea into consideration, since the date was pushed back many times beforehand. The reasons why the previous launches were pushed back was because the astronauts weren't ready.
The Navy located the wrecked crew compartment 100 feet deep in the ocean 6 weeks after the explosion. Divers went into the ocean and tried to identify all of the wreckage. They all had a hard time identifying everything because of the strong ocean waves and currents.
The Challenger had 9 other missions prior to the explosion. Its longest flight lasted about 8 days, accomplishing many goals such as the first mission to carry 2 U.S. female astronauts. This mission saw the first spacewalk of the Shuttle program and also deployed the first satellite in the tracking and data relay system constellation. The first mission for the Space Shuttle Challenger, also known as the STS-6, was to deploy the first series of tracking and data relay satellites. The first flight of the Space Shuttle Challenger was known to have the oldest crew members who went into space at the time. Paul J. Weitz, Carol J. Bobko, F. Story Musgrave, and Donald H. Peterson were the first shuttle crew on the Space Shuttle Challenger. The first launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger occurred April 4th, 1983. These people made history and started the legacy of the Space Shuttle Challenger. April 9th, 1983, the first flight successfully landed at Edwards Air Force Base in California. April 19th, the Space Shuttle Challenger made its way back to the Kennedy Space Center to prepare for its next journey in space.
The triumph to this tragedy is that the Space Shuttle Challenger has been in space and has had many successful trips from liftoff to landing.
3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. Liftoff of the orbiter Challenger.
The Space Shuttle Challenger has been launched 10 times but only landed back down on Earth 9 times. The 10th time the Challenger didn't land was when the Challenger exploded.
Another triumph to this tragedy is that on June 18, 1983, the Challenger embarked on its 7th mission. On this mission was the first American woman to travel into space, Sally K. Ride. During the mission, Sally used the shuttle's robotic arm to deploy the first shuttle-powered satellite and retrieve it 2 days later.
There were many pros and cons of the shuttle. After spending a lot of money building the Apollo, the U.S. wanted to develop a low-cost space transportation system. In the 1970s, NASA developed a new space shuttle design. Instead of it being low cost, it ended up having risk, requiring extreme care and very expensive to operate safely. The shuttle did have many achievements. It served satellites in orbit, carried a pressurized laboratory called Space Lab, and opened up the spaceflight experience to scientists and engineers. The overall cost of the shuttle program is $209.1 billion.
NASA is going to put more robots on Mars.
All right, you are looking live pictures at the JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Pasadena, California. We are mere minutes of finding out if this InSight probe will actually land on Mars. Let's listen in.
Touchdown confirmed.
Also, the Parker Solar Probe is going to touch the sun.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff of the mighty Delta IV Heavy rocket with NASA's Parker Solar Probe, a daring mission to shed light on the mysteries of our closest star, the Sun.
NASA is planning a trip to Jupiter's moon Europa, which is scheduled to happen in the 2020s.